going to air it out down the field. Catch and a touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
And welcome inside to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. It's week 2 of our show. It's week 3, week 4, whatever you want to call it of college football season. But I'll tell you what, folks. There is one big thing today in college football. Before we even get into the lines and the odds, over-unders, whatever you want, and I'll give you my 5 picks as well. Before we get into any of that, folks, just got to remind you, SEC football is back. Oh, it is glorious, folks. And I know we started the show last week with the Big Ten coming back, and yes, that was also glorious. But as some say in my 24/7 sports department, some will say this. Real football is back this weekend with the SEC, and I cannot wait. Now it feels like we are deep into college football, or at least we have that great start of college football. Now we know college football is back because you had the ACC playing, you have the Big 12 playing, and now the SEC is back this weekend. We were just waiting for them to start. They're getting underway today. We'll talk a little bit about, in this first segment, the Mississippi State LSU game and why that's the game to watch as well. Also, Kentucky-Auburn, another big one in the mix. I'll talk to you guys about that a little bit later, of course, as a spoiler alert, that is in one of my picks, or my 5 picks, when we do at the end of the show. So let's start out with first the SEC. Also, by the way, we are going to have Eitan Shander join us in a little bit. But we have to start out with this. The SEC is back. And guess what else happened last night, folks? I feel like we could barely do a show without talking about the return of football, despite the fact that we have football going on right now. Right? You know, we have a couple weeks of college football in, ACC, Big 12 happening, Group of 5 schools playing. We talked last week about the Big 10 saying, yes, we're coming back, but we have to wait till October for them to come back. Well, guess what? The Pac-12 is back now. So Commissioner Larry Scott, rest of the Pac-12, they released their statement last night, and their plan for the college football season is to come back in November. Now, on the surface, this seems like, well, is it really worth playing a fall season then? Are you going to be eligible for the college football playoff? Because at the end of the day, folks, for these Power 5 teams, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, is the college football playoff. Now, Oregon, in the first college football playoff, made the initial championship game. You know, they beat up undefending national champion Florida State, and they lost to Ohio State in the championship game. And the only other Pac-12 team to make it was 2 years later in Washington, and they got shellacked by Alabama, 24-7. May not look like a big shellacking on paper, but that game was never close. And if you folks go back and watch that or remember that, you'll remember Washington did not look like a playoff team that year against Alabama. So the Pac-12 has not been represented in the college football playoff. But in the end, they're a Power 5 conference. They had a team in Oregon last year that won the Rose Bowl that was on the doorstep of the college football playoff as well. So they need that in order to justify a fall football season. So in the end, they will be, but they are going to have a season that is going to be 1 week shorter than the Big Ten. So the Big Ten is going to start October 24th, right? The Pac-12 is starting the following week. They're going to have they're actually going to start 2 weeks later, essentially. They are going to have a 6-game regular season. Now, I don't think I shouldn't even say that. The Big Ten is really squeezing it in, and they're hoping that nothing happens in terms of postponements with the coronavirus. The Pac-12, meanwhile, is going to have a 6-game regular season, and they're going to do the same thing as the Big Ten, where they're going to have the championship game the day before, December 19th. In this case, Pac-12 plays on a Friday, which they'll play on December 18th. But that same weekend is where the College Football Playoff Committee makes their final picks for the top 4. They're going to do that on a Sunday. So for the Pac-12, you're going to have 6 regular season games, a championship game on December 18th, 2 days before the final selection, And also everybody else is going to play, like the Big Ten. You're going to play, second place will play second place, third place against third place, and so on and so forth. So everyone's going to have that seventh game to add to the record. So everyone's playing on a quote-unquote championship weekend. But the Pac-12 you thought the Big Ten was going to try to squeeze it in. The Pac-12 is really squeezing it in. Now, they were adamant about not starting around the same time as the Big Ten or even a week earlier. Instead of October 24th, they thought, okay, maybe the 31st on Halloween weekend, or if not, start just whenever they can. But the problem is the Pac-12 was adamant about the 6 to 8 week ramp-up period where you get those 6 weeks of preparation, you get those 8 weeks of preparation, however it's going to be when they're allowed to start practice. That's why they pushed that date back to November 6th and November 7th, those days, like around that time, that first weekend of November. So here's the issue the Pac-12 is going to have. Some of these teams, like teams in California, due to coronavirus restrictions, or even look at the teams in Oregon and Oregon State, the wildfires up there. When are these schools going to practice? So if the Pac-12 has any hope of the college football playoff, no doubt, just like the Big Ten, and the Big Ten at least has Ohio State, so you might get away with a Ohio State team that gets in with one loss. I don't know where that loss would go, and they would win the Big Ten championship at all anyway, considering you're playing mostly division games this year. But hypothetically, if you had a 8-1 Ohio State Big Ten champion, they're more likely to get in than, let's say, a 6-1 Oregon team. Oregon's going to be the highest ranked team coming back for the Pac-12 when they eventually go into the polls. Oregon is the defending Rose Bowl champion. I know they lost Justin Herbert, but the way Mario Cristobal has that program set up, they are going to come back as the highest ranked team in the Pac-12. So don't pretend otherwise. But as a 6-1 Oregon team, hypothetically, if they manage to get in all 6 games, win a championship in the Pac-12, but also drop a game along the way, is that 6-1 Oregon team going to have enough juice to get to the playoff? I don't think so. Now with 6 wins, going to be against an 8-1 Ohio State team, or even, let's say, a 9-1, 10-1 champion from another conference, depending on how many games get played, there's no way. Playing less games hurts your resume. It's blatantly obvious. There's no doubt about that. So the problem for the Pac-12 is you're going to need a 7-0 champion that's rolling through their schedule and has a convincing championship victory. But the Pac-12, at the end of the day, in a regular year, in a normal year, would probably get the short end of the stick anyway in terms of making the playoff. Usually we're going to have 2 SEC teams make the playoff. I mean, don't forget, a couple years ago, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma. I mean, those 4 teams anyway are the majority of the picks this year in a wacky coronavirus year for college football. Clemson's going to get in, barring something crazy. They will likely run the table, go undefeated. They are going to be 11-0, 12-0, however it's going to shape out at the end of the year. Obviously, postponements and cancellations are the reason why you can't really determine their final record at this moment. They're not going to play a full 13-game schedule, which includes the championship game this year. But you're going to see an undefeated Clemson team in there. You're likely going to see the SEC champion in there. Because I would imagine the SEC champion this year is going to have one loss, if not be undefeated, whether that's going to be Alabama, whether Georgia, whether Florida does it. I think it's going to be, one of those 3 teams, in my opinion, is going to get to the college football playoff. So for the Pac-12, you can't forget about the Big 12, folks. That's going to be Oklahoma. Again, it was against Missouri State last week or the other week, but Oklahoma looks dangerous. Spencer Rattler looks for real. He looks like a Heisman contender already. And again, it was Missouri State. Let's not pretend that was a good football team. But Oklahoma, if they go undefeated in the Big 12 and they have Spencer Rattler leading the way with a Heisman campaign, there's no way they're going to be out of the playoff. So all of a sudden you have 3 spots with the champions. The 3 of the Power 5 champions that I just mentioned from the Big 10, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12. Actually, no, there you go. There's 4 right there because I almost forgot about the Big 10 in at least that little monologue there. But you look at the Big 10, Ohio State's going to get in, no doubt. If you go based on what I think is going to happen in terms of these teams winning these conferences, the Pac-12 is even a Pac-12 champion, an undefeated 7-0 Pac-12 champion is not going to get in because you could very easily have. Clemson's going to get in. I can't see him losing the game. The SEC champion is going to be undefeated or have one loss, but they're going to have more merit than the Pac-12 because the conference is harder. The Big Ten, I still believe Ohio State's going to go undefeated, so boom, there you go. There's 3 spots. And then the Big 12, if Oklahoma drops a game, maybe you could have an argument with a one-loss Oklahoma team against a 7-0 Oregon team, let's say. But other than that, where is the Pac-12 getting in? And here's a little tidbit for you. So there were reports that Larry Scott, of course, even during when football was going to be canceled this year, and there was no football for the Pac-12. Larry Scott's the commissioner of the Pac-12, right? He was of the mind that he wanted to fight for a potential playoff expansion. But then he kind of reversed course last night in the Pac-12 statement and said, well, we're not really worried about college football playoff expansion right now, even in this year. And it's like, if you're going to expand the playoff at any time, and I believe college football will eventually expand the playoff to maybe 6 or 8 teams down the line. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, to be honest with you. Maybe within the next 5 years, that's kind of pushing it for me. But in a wacky year like this, where the NBA and NHL were in bubbles, they had huge playoff systems to include a lot of teams to get to their traditional brackets. Baseball went to 60 games this year, and 8 teams from each league that, God, if my Boston Red Sox were alive at all this year, they might have snuck into the playoffs this year as an 8th seed. And I get those are professionals. Even the NFL, by the way, they're playing completely normal football right now. 16 games scheduled. I get there's no fans, very limited fans in all the stadiums. But other than that, the season is normal right now. 16 games, and even the NFL, which has a perfect playoff system, expanded by 1 team in each conference. They have 7 in each. So why you just feel like the college football playoff is bound for expansion at some point. And it's very curious to me as to why Larry Scott, the commissioner of the Pac-12, decided to not fight or at least bring up the idea of a college football playoff expansion more so during these times. Now, whether it would happen, that remains to be seen. Obviously, I think it would be doubtful. But in a year like this, and here's why it probably still wouldn't even happen in a wacky year like this, because if you expand to 6 or 8 teams to include more Power 5 teams, maybe you finally get your group of 5 champion, maybe like a Central Florida who's really good this year, or Cincinnati. You finally get them in, but you have 8 teams this year or 6 teams this year, it doesn't matter. Does that call for expansion in future years, or do you say, all right, we only did this expansion just because of this year? You know what else is wacky this year? The bowls are already wacky this year, so why not expand this year? There's going to be no minimum win requirement for bowl games this year. And I think they're only doing that because teams are going to play, a range from 6 to 8 to 10, maybe 12 games if they're lucky at this point. So hypothetically, you could have a winless football team in a bowl game. Now, will these bowl games be used more for the traditional out-of-conference rivalry games that we might have missed? Maybe. Are they going to get intriguing matchups that might have been on the schedule beforehand? If the teams have really nothing to play for other than the playoff, then maybe, yeah, that's probably why they're doing it. But, if you're going to change the entire bowl system for the year, why not say, all right, we'll expand the playoff to 6 teams, or something along those lines where maybe you have 5 teams this year. How about that? Maybe something wacky where you have a play-in game, so the 4 and 5 teams play, or you have a 16 bracket, so then the top 2 get buys. I don't know. I mean, I think they're going to expand anyway at some point, but why not this year? So I find that very curious by Larry Scott, the commissioner of the Pac-12, to not say we are going, or he didn't say we wanted to expand. He was like, yeah, we're not worried about that right now. All right. Okay, Larry. When the Pac-12 is shut out of the playoff once again this year, you'll know why. And it's funny, the Pac-12 admitted last night, too, they followed the lead of the Big Ten. If you're going to follow the lead of the Big Ten in canceling your season and then bringing it back, and I get the West Coast with California and Oregon are a little bit different in terms of the local restrictions, but if you're going to follow the Big Ten's lead, why are you not aiming for the October 24th start? The Mountain West came back last night, folks, as well. Now the MAC is the only conference, as of this morning, that has not officially come back yet or stated a return date. The Mountain West came back. They are starting October 24th. They will have an 8-game season, and they are going to have their conference championship game on December 19th. The Mountain West can do it. The Big Ten can do it. The ACC, Big 12, SEC already did it. What are you doing, Pac-12? What are you doing? Oh, man. It just boggles the mind, right, folks? Just absolutely boggles the mind. Just want to remind you folks that this show, College Football Pick'em, I'm your host, Nick Kosko. I just want to remind you that this show is brought to you by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. I was just in this week, actually, a Tuesday and Wednesday. That's when you can find me there, rolling around on the mats, learning some MMA striking. I do it all. We do it all at Harbor Jiu-Jitsu. Look up my head instructor, my good buddy, Al Bruce. He's a purple belt under Professor Gary Lee Tonin. And if you don't know who Gary Tonin is, I suggest you look up Gary Tonin. That's 2 R's in Gary. He is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, world champion, one of the greatest grapplers ever, and he's also a undefeated MMA fighter in one championship right now. So you're getting the best instruction possible right here locally in Egg Harbor Township. If you're in the Egg Harbor Township area, you're in the Atlantic City area, wherever you may be, come on and check out Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township on the Black Horse Pike. You can also email him at harborjujitsu@gmail.com as well. You can catch me in there, folks. Hey, I'm back on the mats. I used to wrestle in high school and college. I'm back on the mats, learning something a little bit new. Obviously, learning how to properly strike with punches and kicks as well. So you can check our good buddies out at Harbor Jiu-Jitsu. All right, we're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we will have Eitan Shander. And I almost don't even want to say what he does, because Eitan does so much stuff in terms of the radio market and writing. I mean, he's on. You can hear him on this station as well. Don't forget that. And he also writes for the Philly Voice. I mean, Eitan is all over the place. Sports Map Radio, Fox Philly Gambler, the Philly Voice, Odd Checker, US. I'm reading his Twitter thing. And he also does appearances on Fox 29. So Eitan is all over the place. He is all over the place. And you can hear him on this station right here, AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. So we'll welcome him in the next segment, get his picks, his thoughts about college football, his best bets of the weekend as well. And, of course, in the final segment of the show, we will get you.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Now, looking ahead to these games today, it's just fascinating to know that the SEC is back, the Big 12's in action, the ACC is in action. There's a good group of 5 schools in action. You know, we're going to get Big 10 football back in October. The Pac-12 is coming back as scheduled in November, as of now, of course. But now we have this. We have this first full slate. First weekend that has a full slate that we haven't had all month. And where I wanted to go with this is, you look at even the SEC being back, the game I'm most fascinated by today, aside from the games that I will be picking in our final segment of the show, I'm looking at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is one of those teams right now. They're a 27.5 point favorite over Kansas State. Now, again, I told you last week that I don't like touching those huge lines unless I'm really confident or I think that, you know, Vegas might be onto something. But I look at Oklahoma, and all I can think about is Lincoln Riley, that offense, and their quarterback. And this year it's Spencer Rattler. In one game, 14-17, 290 yards, 4 touchdowns. And the kid could throw it 51, 52, 53 yards in the air. I mean, even Joel Klatt, who's a college football analyst, he called this kid the next, I won't misquote him, but he has Mahomes-level talent in his arm. As in, Klatt's only seen Mahomes throw the ball like this kid does. That may still sound ridiculous, but Rattler is for real. And he only appeared in a few games last year. He got a little rub in the college football playoff semifinal game, and Oklahoma's lost to LSU last year. But other than that, we haven't really seen him. And for when people watch Oklahoma, and why I think this game could be a candidate to be an absolute blowout over Kansas State, because Kansas State, I mean, who knows with this team? They're all over the place. Kansas State's not a good Power 5 program. They haven't been for a while. So I wouldn't be shocked if Spencer Rattler and the Oklahoma Sooners put up 45, 52 points and Kansas State can't even muster 14. I wouldn't be shocked by that. Rattler tosses another 4 or 5 touchdowns. But I'm fascinated by this because the notion with Oklahoma is it's a complete system offense. The quarterbacks only thrive because of Lincoln Riley. while that may be true to some extent, these quarterbacks are great in this system, so whether or not they're successful in the NFL doesn't matter in terms of Oklahoma. And if you're going to bet the over on their games, or if you're going to take their ridiculous lines, such as this week, minus 27.5 again, against Kansas State at home, though, Oklahoma is hosting this game. If you have a quarterback like a Spencer Rattler, or if you go back to when they had Baker Mayfield, they had Kyler Murray, they had Jalen Hurts last year. They've all had a varying degree of NFL success, aside from Jalen Hurts, who was just drafted this year and he's only appeared, 3 plays in for the Philadelphia Eagles as a decoy player. But you look at Baker Mayfield, rookie touchdown record in the NFL. Kyler Murray had a successful NFL debut last year, and now people think he's a primetime MVP candidate. I'm talking to you, Rich. Quinones. Jalen Hurts, same thing, came from Alabama, and he was a much better player at Oklahoma due to his ability to run the football as well. All these guys could run the football, more so Murray and Hurts the last 2 years. So I look at all 3 quarterbacks and say, all right, if they can do that coming into a system, why can't Spencer Rattler do it? Already learning the system under Lincoln Riley, and all of a sudden, now he's on full display. He's had a year of work. Forget the unusual offseason. Spencer Rattler is a firm Heisman contender this year. He was the number 1 dual-threat quarterback coming out of high school. People forget that. People are in awe of his arm talent. This kid can run too. 14-17. Again, it was Missouri State in Oklahoma's first game. I get it. Please. But the kid can sling the football. And that system is predicated on quick, intermediate passes, spreading the field, and then opening up the big play downfield. It's a quarterback-friendly offense. He only ran it 4 times last week against Missouri State, or 2 weeks ago, Ran for a yard. That includes sacks. He had a 10-yard run in that game. But Rattler's not going to be taking off as much as Hurts did, or especially a guy like Kyler Murray. But Spencer Rattler is firmly in that Heisman candidate. He's firmly a Heisman candidate. If he plays at that level all season long, he's going to carry Oklahoma to the playoff. Without question. So when I look at these lines and say, all right, minus 27.5, I'm inclined to take that. That's 4 Spencer Rattler touchdowns. I know there's no defense in the Big 12, but is Kansas State really going to keep up with the Sooners? I don't think so. Don't forget who Kansas State lost to in their first game. Kansas State has no business being on the field of Oklahoma this week. And I get they upset them last week, but they lost to Arkansas State 35-31 in an upset at home. I mean, do you really think Kansas State losing that football game despite, and I get, they've beaten Oklahoma before. You mean to tell me they're going to do it again this year with Rattler pulling the trigger in Lincoln Riley's system? I don't think so. So that to me is a very intriguing game to look at when it comes to these huge lines. And again, early college football is just so unpredictable because you're going to get huge discrepancies like this where teams are favored by 4, 5 touchdowns, upwards of 24 to 31, 35 points. And it's very tough to take that. But as a 27.5 point favorite, over under 60.5, I mean, I feel like Oklahoma could put up 45 points. And again, then you're just hoping that Kansas State puts up 15, 17 points. I wouldn't mind taking a stab at that. I believe that's a legit bet this week. You look at a noon kickoff coming up. Oklahoma, it's enticing. Personally, I'm not going to touch it. You know how I feel about those huge lines. But Spencer Rattler is the reason why this team is going to blow a lot of people out this year in the Big 12. Am I going to say the same thing when they play Texas? No. Am I going to say the same thing when they play Kansas State, Kansas, maybe at Texas Tech, maybe an Iowa State this year, who might not be as good as we thought? I'd be down to say that. Absolutely. It's all because of Spencer Rattler, who does, in fact, have a Mahomes-level arm. He's got an insane arm. he can flick it off his back foot going 45, 50 yards in the air. To me, that is absurd. Another thing that popped up this week, which was interesting, after Central Florida won their first and only game this year. The number 13 ranked Central Florida Knights. UCF. You know, everyone's darling from a couple years ago when they self-proclaimed that they would be national champions. They had an undefeated season. UCF does, the NCAA does officially, I guess, half recognize them as national champions from a couple years ago, despite the fact that they didn't make the playoff. UCF is a darn good football team. They whacked Georgia Tech 49-21 last week. They are at ECU today at noon. And another game they should just, again, UCF should cakewalk through their conference. Now, because of the Big Ten and Pac-12 re-entering the picture in terms of the college football playoff, I don't think a group of 5 team is going to sneak in this year. And this was the only year to probably do it until down the line where we have an expanded playoff or the committee starts recognizing these teams more. But Dylan Gabriel, the sophomore quarterback for UCF, said, "We're the best team in Florida." Now, are they better than Miami? At least the rankings have it close. Miami's 12, UCF is 13. That'd be a very intriguing matchup in the postseason, in some kind of bowl game. Are they better than Florida State? Right now, yes. Are they better than Florida? Absolutely not. Is UCF good enough to cover these huge spreads like a team like Oklahoma? Maybe. Let's take a look at that line against ECU today. 27. On the road. If that doesn't scream stay away, I don't know what does. Can UCF blow out a team like East Carolina like they did last week against Georgia Tech and beat it by 28 and actually cover that? Sure. Is Dylan Gabriel good enough to throw 400 yards again? 4 touchdowns? Sure. I can't see that happening. No way. UCF, you're the self-proclaimed national champions of 3 years ago. Now you're the Dylan Gabriel, your quarterback, calls you the best team in Florida. I would love to see Central Florida play the Florida Gators. But don't forget, a couple years ago when they were the self-proclaimed national champions, they did beat Auburn in that Peach Bowl. And that's when people said, all right, maybe this team is for real. And they were undefeated for 2 years. Scott Frost did a great job with that program until he bolted for his home school of Nebraska. UCF is a legit group of 5 team. Honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing them in the ACC or throwing the SEC as another Florida team. Could they compete? I think they could be a decent team right away. You have to start winning recruiting battles with the SEC schools, but UCF is a legit football team, despite the fact they have that group of 5 label. But a 27-point spread on the road, even against East Carolina, who's not going to do much of anything this year, particularly against that team. 27 on the road, folks, stay away. Stay away. Your self-proclaimed best team in Florida, from Dylan Gabriel, the Central Florida quarterback, it's not happening today. Not happening. Not 27 points. Can't do it. Cannot do it. I promised to talk about a little bit Mississippi State and LSU as well, because that game is fascinating at 3:30 today. Mike Leach is making his debut, as well as I mentioned Florida and Florida and Ole Miss before. Ole Miss is coached by Lane Kiffin, another SEC debut for these head coaches. SEC is going to be fascinating with Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach this year. But Mississippi State and LSU, because you have Mike Leach, who's bringing this air raid offense to the SEC. Now, we know in the Pac-12 that translates to a lot of points. Pac-12 just like the Big Ten, or the Pac-12 just like the Big 12, there's no defense. There's a lot of points, particularly when it's a Mike Leach team. Mike Leach gives his air raid offense, lets his quarterbacks throw 45, 50, 60 times a game. And they could put up 40, 50, even, heck, sometimes 60 points once in a blue moon. Does that translate to SEC football where it's offensive line, defensive line play, it's solid quarterback play, but it's also a mix of the run game? And the SEC is as close to what the NFL looks like in terms of style of play. Not the Big 12 where it's a total passing conference. Not the Big Ten where it's the old school defense and running, with the exceptions of a guy like Justin Fields at Ohio State with their quarterback. SEC is a mix of everything. You're not going to take that air raid offense into the SEC and automatically score 45 points. And I get LSU lost defensive coordinator Dave Aranda. They lost passing game coordinator Joe Brady. They lost Joe Burrow. They lost their two top receivers, one to the draft, which was Justin Jefferson, and one to an opt-out, Jamar Chase. They lost Clyde Edwards-Helaire to the draft. They lost guys on defense like Patrick Queen and Kayvon Kazan. You lost all these pieces. Miles Brennan, the new quarterback. He has no Jamar Chase this year. That offense might take a step back. You still have guys like Derek Stingley on defense, though. This is a solid LSU team. Are they warrant a number 6 ranking? Possibly, but it remains to be seen. If they take care of business today against Mississippi State, then we'll have a different conversation. But I look at that line, 16.5 LSU favorites at home, over on 57. You're inclined to take the over because you think Mike Leach's new offense, I shouldn't say new offense, but taking the air raid offense to the SEC is going to translate to a lot of points. He brings in KJ Costello, the transfer from the Pac-12, Stanford. So it's Costello, his quarterback. The guy who's going to be like a Gardner Minshew at Washington State, like a Luke Falk at Washington State a handful of years ago. Mike Leach likes his style. He can air it out. But are they going to score at will on the road against LSU? Ed Orgeron, for what you want to say, how either he struck lightning in a bottle or he just had the perfect storm of basically an NFL team last year when they went 15-0 in LSU, Ed Orgeron's going to have this team ready to play. He's been fighting and getting these guys ready to play football since college football was in danger of not happening this year. Mississippi State comes in unranked. LSU, top 10 already, defending national champions, home opener, season over for the SEC. I feel like that line's a little too much, but that over-under at only 57, when I would expect Mississippi State to put up at least mid-20s, around 25 points, and then if LSU wins this game by at least 10 points, I'm thinking this game is going to go over. Miles Brennan's better than you think at quarterback, folks. Joe Burrow aside, Miles Brennan is pretty darn good. When you learn from Joe Brady last year, you get that coaching, you watch Joe Burrow, you work with him all year last year, and we saw how great Joe Burrow was last year. Historic season. Over 5,000 yards, 60 touchdowns, 6 picks. That's it. Number 1 overall pick. Miles Brennan learned. He knows he's going to be good this year. Not Joe Burrow level, but good this year. So the line, a little iffy for me, 16.5 for LSU, but that over-under, very enticing. But I think Brennan can still make this offense go round, despite the fact there's no Jefferson, there's no Chase, there's no Thaddeus Moss, there's no Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He can make the offense go with him at quarterback. Plus, again, the over-under is enticing because of that air raid offense from Mike Leach and Mississippi State. That's why that game's the most fascinating in the SEC this week. I'm looking forward to watching Florida, but don't worry, I'm going to have my eye at 3:30 on Mississippi State and LSU. But you know Mike Leach is going to do something crazy. He's not going to hold anything back in the opener. It's conference only schedule this year, folks. Can't hold anything back. You got to go for it. It's a weird year, and Mike Leach is going to make sure the SEC feels the weirdness in 2020. Air raid offense and all. LSU minus 16.5. Over set at 57. I'd lay it on the over. Gotta lay it on the over. I have a funny feeling that air raid offense is going to shock a lot of people, especially early on. Don't be surprised if Mississippi State got to a 14-0 lead. And all of a sudden it becomes a shootout. By the fourth quarter, we're sitting at 35-28. There's your over, folks. There's your over. All right, we're going to step aside, take one last break. On the other side, you will hear my picks of the week. We were 2-3 last week. We'll try to do better this week, folks. That's all.
Now back to College Football Pick'em with Nick Kosko, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Welcome back inside the College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. Final segment of the show here. We're going to dive into my 5 picks for the weekend. Today is going to have a nice slate of college football, folks. Oh, I can't wait. The SEC is back, and I'll tell you what, one game I'm going to be watching, it's not on my list here for my 5 picks. We were 2-3 last week, by the way, so not terrible, but I know, folks, for you guys, not good enough. But one game that's on my radar today is Florida and Ole Miss. And I'll tell you why real quick. I'm a huge fan of the Florida Gators. I love what Dan Mullen does with his offense. I'm a huge fan of quarterback Kyle Trask. This team is already ranked 5 in the AP poll, top 25. I think they're a prime contender to win the SEC. I think they're going to make the college football playoff this point. I'm putting it down right now. Florida college football playoff. I just think so. You know what? I have a funny feeling about Florida this year. And I think it's because I just watched them a lot last year. But again, it comes down to your coach and quarterback. It's a loaded SEC. Can they get by Georgia and their new starting quarterback, DeJuan Mathis? I think so. That's the main competition in that division. And then you have Alabama in the SEC championship games. I don't see LSU being as good as last year. I don't think Auburn's going to totally break through. Texas A&M, no. So I would get some money on Oregon, some money on Florida to make the championship game. Here are your odds to win the championship game. Florida, plus 1,800, 18-1. 18-1 to win the college football playoff. To make it, I didn't think they could make it. I think they could definitely make it. But I like those. I like that. 18-1 for Florida to win it all. Let's just say Clemson, Ohio State. How about we say Bama and Florida? Who's Florida have to get by, likely? Clemson. If they can do that, no doubt they can beat the other. They can beat one of the other two. I'm just saying, 18-1 on Florida. I like that. All right, let's dive into my picks this weekend as we have 5 games for you. And don't forget, you can also hear this 5-pick segment on Back Your Play with Rich Quinones, who's on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 4 to 6 p.m. on this very station, AM 1490. And we do this every Wednesday where I give them a abbreviated version of my 5 picks. So let's start with Florida State and Miami. So I loved what Miami did last week, right? Miami had Derek King. It's the Derek King show at quarterback. But Miami is 2-0 now. They took care of ranked Louisville. Miami is now number 12 in the country. Florida State under Mike Norvell, they're not where they're supposed to be. Okay, they're not quite there. Again, he's coming over from Memphis from last year. He's building a new program with the Seminoles. They're trying to get back to the tradition of Florida State football, which is top contender in the ACC, top contender in the country. They're not even close to that right now, in my mind, from what I've seen. Miami is laying 11 right now at home. Can they win by 2 touchdowns is my big question. I think so. Now, I picked them last week against Louisville on the road. They were plus 2.5, and let me get the actual final score for you so I don't screw this up. But they more than covered it because they obviously won 47-34. They beat Louisville by 13 on the road last week. Louisville by 13 on the road. If that's any indication, give me Miami. Give me the minus 11 over Florida State. That's game number 1. Game number 2, Army at Cincinnati. This is a very intriguing one because these are 2 top 25 teams, once again, like we did last week with Miami and Louisville. But Army is a nice 2-0. Army's always going to hang around the back end of the top 25. They have a great year. Maybe they'll approach top 15, top 10 even. But Army is just solid. I know they beat Middle Tennessee State. I know they beat University of Louisiana Monroe. But combined scores, 42-0, 37-7. They have outscored their 2 opponents this year, 79-7. 79-7. Now, are they going to destroy Cincinnati? No. Are they going to beat Cincinnati? I don't know. I'm not really sure. But Cincinnati is right now minus 14. If you think Cincinnati is going to beat Army by 2 touchdowns, you're crazy. You're crazy. You know how Army's offense operates. Now, it's either going to have a really bad day, the triple option, or it's going to have a great day in a win or a loss. Because you know Army's triple option offense is predicated on chewing up that clock. Long drives. Whether they're short intermediate plays, they're going to eat up 6, 8, even 10 minutes on the clock with these drives. They're going to go 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 play drives. Even to kick a field goal, they'll do that. But that's going to annoy the crap out of Cincinnati and Luke Fickell. Now, I think Cincinnati is probably going to win this football game, but Army plus 14, again, I know it's on the road, but fans are not the biggest factor this year, but Army plus 14 on the road is just too enticing to take. I am going to take that one, so give me Army plus 14 at Cincinnati. Game number 3, we're going back to Louisville, folks. So Louisville and Pittsburgh. This is another ranked matchup in the ACC and also throughout college football. Now, this game's at 12, so it's coming up soon. Louisville is 1-1, coming off the loss against Miami, and Pittsburgh at home. You have a 24 versus 21 matchup. Pittsburgh is -3 at home. They destroyed Austin Peay 55-0. And now, folks, I know we took Syracuse over Pittsburgh last week, at least to cover, plus 21.5. I like that because I thought Syracuse's defense was a little bit better than people were giving credit for. So Pittsburgh beat it. This is almost a pick 'em right here, Pitt and Louisville. Now, can they beat him by a field goal and will push? Sure. But I think Louisville, in this case, with that -3 line, this is pretty much a pick'em game right here. So I'd roll with the Pitt Panthers. I think they're slightly better. But if Malik Cunningham for the Louisville Cardinals takes over today, then, well, this might be a loser. But I'll tell you what, Pitt playing at home, and just from what I saw last week, Miami's defense isn't as good as Pitt. So Miami was struggling last week to contain Cunningham, the Louisville offense. I think Pitt will have a better time with that. So give me Pitt -3 at home over Louisville. Now, I teased this earlier in the show. Kentucky and Auburn, yet another ranked matchup. Number 23 Kentucky, number 8 Auburn. We're finally getting the SEC back. Boy, this is just so great. Isn't it just nice to hear the words SEC football? I don't care if you're a Big Ten. I don't care if you stand the Big 12. I don't care if you stand the Big 10, the ACC. I don't care if you're out in the Pacific Northwest with Washington and Oregon. SEC football is so good and so great to have back on your television screens. SEC Network for this one at 12 noon. So Kentucky, number 23, head coach Mark Stoops believes this team can contend for an SEC title, and I would love to have some of what he's having, Mark Stoops, but I like Auburn in this game. Here's the thing. I had this game at -10.5, but late line shifts, folks. This is a big one, and this is why I'm going to double down on Auburn here. That line is now -7.5. All right, we're getting that line at -7.5. Now, I had these written down earlier in the week. It wasn't moving. The line has shifted, so people are taking Kentucky. Guess what? I was going to take Auburn anyway. I was going to take Auburn anyway at -10.5. Now they're at -7.5, and if Bo Nix is as good as I think he is, the quarterback of Auburn, this is going to be a blowout. This could be easily a blowout. Both have defenses that'll make you mad, will annoy you, throw things off. You might see less points than you're expecting this one, but oh my God, that line moving now from 10.5 to 7.5. This just made my morning. This just made my morning, folks, and it's going to make your day as well. Give me Auburn -7.5. Bo Nix is going to light up the Kentucky Wildcat defense. So far we have Miami -11 against Florida State, Army +14 on the road at Cincinnati, Pittsburgh -3 at home against Louisville, and Auburn -7.5 at home against Kentucky. Final game, Iowa State TCU. This one's interesting because TCU is getting their quarterback back, Max Duggan. Now, is he going to start the entire game? I don't know. So he was out, injury, COVID-related. It was a bunch of things why he was out. But they are going to split. He's going to split quarterback reps. Now, I think he's going to play well enough to warrant playing most of the snaps. But I found it interesting that Iowa State, who suffered the upset loss in their first game 2 weeks ago now to Louisiana, 31-14, and it wasn't good. TCU hasn't played yet, so I think in their first game, TCU's gonna have that. They're gonna have a little extra juice considering they're also at home. So I like TCU in this game. And plus, here's another thing: I usually love home dogs, and in this case, I love this because they're +2.5 at home. So again, you're almost down to a pick 'em, and so it's like, all right, who do you think's gonna win? If TCU's a home dog, I'll take that. Over on a set of 44.5. So are there going to be a lot of points in the Big 12? There usually is. But can TCU contain Brock Purdy, the Iowa State quarterback? He's considered one of the better quarterback prospects going into the NFL next year. Is he a first-round pick? Maybe on the fringe. Probably more of a second or third-round pick, to be honest with you. But you never know. You never know this day and age. But the fact that TCU is plus 2.5 at home just gives me it entices me to take that. And I told Rich this on Back Your Play earlier this week on Wednesday. I told him, I was like, you know what? They're getting Dugan back. He's the better of the two quarterbacks they use when they use their two quarterback system at TCU. So with him back, they're at home dog, first game of the year, a little extra juice. I like it. You should like it. So let's go TCU plus 2.5 over Ohio State. So again, we'll recap these 5 picks right here. Florida State at Miami. We have Miami minus 11. Army at Cincinnati. Army plus 14. Louisville at Pitt. Pitt minus 3. Kentucky at Auburn. We have Auburn minus 7.5 on that line. That shifted a lot this week. And then Iowa State at TCU. We have TCU plus 2.5. So those are your 5 picks. Those are Nick's picks right there. You can always hear them on Back Your Play on Wednesdays, 4 to 6 p.m. with Rich Quinones and myself around 4:15, 4:20. And, of course, on this very show right here, College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Just want to give our shout-out one more time to our sponsor, Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Go in there, get a great workout, learn a great discipline in martial art. It's the best thing you could ever do. All right, those are our 5 picks, 2 and 3 last week. Let's go 5-0 this week, and that I'll tell you what, folks. If I'm 5-0 going into next week, and we're 7-3 after 2 weeks, oh boy, you are gonna hear about it. Sorry, I'll still brag that if I go 0-5, I'll own up to it. I own up to that stuff. But if we go 5-0 this week, haven't had one in a while. We go 5-0. I'll tell you what, you're not gonna hear the end of it next week as well. All right, that's going to do it for me. Enjoy the games today, folks. I'm Nick Kosko. This has been College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu.